Right then, welcome to another OpenChain webinar. This one is a little different to usual. We're having a panel with people in all types of different locations coming together to talk about generative AI, risks and management. We're going to start with an interesting question answered, which is when it comes to generative AI or open source in compliance in general, are there still things to worry about? Are there still open source compliance lawsuits and so on happening right now? To that foundational question, I believe we have a potential answer from Chan Zhou, who's online and sharing his video.
All right, here I am. Thank you for letting me speak first because actually I have no time. I have a company meeting going on today. Once a year, everyone is coming from their home offices to our headquarters here in Würzburg. And let me just introduce myself very quickly. I'm a lawyer. We are a law firm mostly specialized in open source compliance. We're about 45 people, 28 lawyers, I think. And what I wanted to talk about to you is a lawsuit going on that has been discussed heavily and caused dismay or applause, depending on what side you are in the business. And the lawsuit is about this car. You might recognize it. It's a Chinese car. And this car is the matter of case in a lawsuit in Munich because of its non-existing or non-visible open source compliance. And you may be aware of the video case in the US, which is quite similar to this one. It is based not on the rights of copyright holders, but rather from a customer. So the number first learning we have here is that if you have deficit in open source post compliance, then you don't have to wait for a copyright holder, but actually every single customer can sue you for rectification or claiming their money back. And that's the first learning. And I think that point has already been made even before we have a verdict. And I think, and I hope we will never have a verdict because this is just a demonstrational case. So number one learning is force is important because it's not a matter of copyright holders, but rather from customers, from any customer. And the number two learning is that when you look at these Chinese cars, it turns out, how do we say it nicely, that they may not all be on the same level as European or German car manufacturers. Actually, some of them are very easily spotted. This one, for example, has no copyright information whatsoever, not in the car, not in the glove compartment, and I don't know how to open this. Actually, I don't drive this car. It's my assistant, and not on the website, and no answer from the company if you write to them until recently. So number two learning is that some homework still has to be done by some companies, and I think it's important if you want to go on a global market. And number three learning is that in this case, if you challenge someone, it takes about 6 months for them to get up to speed. That's a good news, maybe, but I don't want to know what it meant to the people at Psych to go through this procedure. So that's the last learning that false compliance can be achieved. However, we must say there's no such thing as 100% compliance in open source. I mean, I had a meeting with lawyers from Psych yesterday, and they have some 10,000 megabytes of code they want to send over, which we will then publish on GitHub. And of course, when I say it's not about source code only, we also need the scripting and the tools to create the binary files. And office labels says they are going, no, that's not possible, even though this is not the standard that you have. So my learning from that is everyone selling on a global scale should at least fulfill a compliance standard where you're not an easy prey, we're not an easy target. And this case is a demonstration of what could happen if someone would make a business model of that, which we will not. We are usually on the other side. But if we were to analyze the source code that are coming in or will be published, like happened with BMW or Tesla in the past, and we will hand that over to Andreas, with whom we work together regularly. And it will probably just take him 1 or 2 days to find something, some GPL3 licenses. Actually, we already found them, and GPL3 is not a good idea usually in a car. So, Shane, that's the case. I would have loved to talk about AI generated code and solve this also problems, but you just wanted that top news about the car, and here it is. Actually, I should not be driving it in traffic because using the car is actually already a copyright violation. That's why I'm not driving. It's just sitting here for the rest of the year. All right. See you.
Thank you very much indeed, Chanjo. And you know, what's interesting about this is to see cases are happening. They're in action today. We do know the Vizio case very well in the United States, but this is a case in Germany. And when Chanjo pointed at the car and said, this car is involved in the case, he meant literally that car. That car is the one. So we have a situation where copyright enforcement is occurring, and we have customers as well as the original developers involved in copyright enforcement. Question is that an issue around generative AI? Should we worry about generative AI and open source enforcement, or is it, a nebulous future problem to think about? The answer is it's not so nebulous at all. Andreas from Bitsy, I believe you have some insight into how generative AI and open source compliance can be a challenge in the real world. Shall I hand over to you for that bit?
Yes, thank you. Let me just share my screen. You should now be able to see it.
I can now see your screen.
Wonderful. So good morning, everybody. My name is Andreas Kotula. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the founder and managing director of Bitsy. Around 2 years ago, I had a first presentation about generative AI and how it develops software. And it was very amazing at that time what AI can do. And in the meantime, now 2 years later, AI has arrived in development. So it's used everywhere. We can see that around 80% of the developers, they are using AI to generate their code. And when we talk to companies, we see around 30% of the companies, they say we are using AI, and the code you get is generated by AI. And there are dramatic advantages if you use AI to generate code. You're much faster. We see people reporting 25 or 50 or even more percent speed increase that they get in developing. On the other hand, there are also some risks that should be taken care of so that you can unfold the full potential of the code generation. To start with our panel, we prepared some examples where we can see how this AI code generation works. And the AI systems, they can generate code because they were trained by some code. And typically, open source code is used to train the models. So whatever has been found in GitHub and all the other big repositories has been used to run through the AI training machines and to train the large language models. And we will see what that means. So I have the first example. In here, this is an example from Copilot. And the first characters you see here, this is the prompt. So the developer just puts in this part or piece of a code, and you can see there is some matrix transpose, some mathematical algorithm that shall be implemented. And Copilot recognizes immediately what the developer wants to do and then gives a suggestion what the developer could do. So whatever you see right now is generated by the AI. It looks like a quite complicated, complex algorithm, including comments. And when you run it, you will see that it works quite fine. And a developer would have taken quite some time to write that. So this is really great what AI can do. Now, if we look, why is the AI capable of doing so? We have said it has learned that from the repositories. Then we should be able to find this algorithm somewhere on the internet. So we searched and we actually found something in GitHub. You will find this algorithm which transposes a matrix. And when you look at the details, you will see it's exactly the same. So each variable, each line break, and even the comments are exactly the same as the AI has produced. There's one small difference, which we have not seen from the AI. In the original code, there is some copyright holder and some license that you can see. So in the Copilot, you will not be able to see that, which makes it difficult for the user or developer to see, or if he wants to be compliant, he needs to find out where does this piece of code come from, which very often is not obvious. So this was a first example I had presented some time ago. There are even nicer examples. For example, if you want to write a function is even. So you just want to see is a number, is it even or not? I first show the prompt again, the developer starts typing and just wants to know, write me the function is even. Then the AI system will kick in and will write the following code. As a developer, you will now be a little bit surprised about this algorithm because there are faster ways. I will show that in a minute. But when we look at the algorithm, it will work. So the first checked if it's 0, 0 is even, then the function will return true. If it's 1, it will return false. If it's less than 0, it will just call itself again with a minus. Otherwise, it will subtract 2 from the number it has been given and call itself again. So it's like a recursive algorithm. It's a very unusual solution and it's not really performant. So nobody would develop it like that. And if you don't understand code, you would probably not recognize. It also has some kind of test cases here. And again, we checked why would an AI create code like this? And this time the solution is in a book, Eloquent JavaScript in the 4th edition. And there is one section explaining recursion to the developers. And this is a perfect example how you can explain recursion. And for that, it is really good. It's just not effective if you want to see if a number is even or not. And we see that the whole book is under a non-commercial copyright. The code is under MIT. So we would have at least have expected that there is some note that the code should have that is under MIT. If we look how an experienced developer would have written the code, so you just check the one bit. Where is it? Take a second. So this is how you would normally do it. Then it's very easy. You just divide by 2 and then you know how it should be done. Now, my favorite example is a game you may remember, Quake 3, which was very popular almost 20 years ago. It was the first game with lots of visual graphics, and that requires the computers to put in a lot of power in all the calculation and the 3D graphics that are used. And to calculate the vectors, you need the inverse square root. And that is quite an expensive algorithm to get that number exact. And there was a very experienced developer who found a very unique algorithm that is very, very fast, and it does not directly calculate the square root, but has an approximation, which can be generated very quickly by some crazy shifting the bits and the registers. So again, I started with the prompt fast inverse square root, and then Copilot will answer like this. First you think, oh, nice, there's a copyright holder, there's even a license that you get. And then here is this algorithm, which is very unique. So you get some number. And then the crazy part is here where you do some direct bit shifting to get an approximation for the number. It works pretty well. So as a user, you won't see that it's just an approximation. And for that, this algorithm has been used in all the gaming machines. It's still used today. And it's just one cornerstone of the graphics calculations that you need whenever you do 3D calculations. Again, we were checking where is the source for this algorithm. And we know it was created by a company, IDsoft. And of course, you can find the original in the internet. It says it's Quake 3, it's the IDsoft copyright. Interestingly, the original has a GPL2 copyright. So what happened here is the AI has realized from a piece of code there should be some copyright on top, and it created something. So this is completely artificial. It's fake. It's not real. We have a fake copyright holder and a fake license, which now makes it even more difficult for the user to understand what is happening, because as a developer you may think, oh, I have everything, I have a license, I know how I can use it, everything is fine. But it's just not correct. And here you see again, it's exactly the same algorithm that was used here. Again, the same crazy numbers, bit shifting that is happening here. So these were the 3 examples I wanted to show. We have another nice example from ScanOSS, where their own code has been copied, and I'll hand over to Julian for that.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, well, this is a good example too. It's basically the developer requested the winnowing algorithm, which is an open source code that is used for detecting similarities. I mean, this is not created by us. We just took something that was already out there. We adapted this code to the sheer amount of information we have, but it's basically in this particular case, there are plenty of implementations on the internet, but in this particular case, the match is much longer than this. But this function actually includes the verbatim copy of the developer's comment. So our comment, you can see our code in the right side, and the original and the generated code on the left side. So it's back to what Shane was saying, that the problem is not on whether or not we need to worry about compliance. That's not nebulous as you describe it at all. I totally agree, especially when Andreas just showed how the machine can hallucinate a copyright statement and a license. I mean, that's really scary. So I think that, we have a collection, like most likely everyone here in the call has, of matches of what's being generated by the machine. So I think that we all agree here that this is something that requires doing something about it.
And I think it shows AI is great to generate code. There is a lot of potential, but there are also some risks that somehow need to be managed.
Yeah. Can I ask a question about to Chanjo about the case? Because I wanted to raise my hand, but I didn't want to disrupt his initial part of the presentation. I was wondering how similar is his case when compared to the software transparency case against Visio in the US, which also doesn't involve the actual copyright holder.
Unfortunately, he's opening his company event right now. He's keynoting.
Oh, that's right. But maybe Andreas can answer that one?
I don't know.
I will do a follow-up with that one, because
we can do a follow-up.
He said there's parallels with it in that both cases are coming from a consumer rather than the developer, which indicates a potential new front of copyright compliance. I'd be curious to see what parallels there are. By the way, we actually have 2 questions in, and they go to both Andreas and Julian, I think. One is from Martin, and he was talking about the Copilot examples from Andreas. He wanted to know, are these examples with the Copilot default settings guarding against matches turned off?
So that is not turned off. So it's just the default settings. I think there was a change sometime where you can tell Copilot to not use open source or to just use small samples. So this was turned off. So that's not on.
And the second question Martin had was, is the header fake, or did Witkopf get misrepresented? So this relates to the imaginary developer that we saw their copyright header incorrectly applied. Is that entirely fake, or is Witkopf a real person and it just got confused? Do you have any idea about that?
We did not research that. We tried to find it, but we couldn't find anything.
Yeah. There was no obvious reason that a Vitkov had the copyright of this code.
No.
At the end of the day, it doesn't make a big difference, right? Whether the person exists or not. I mean, just as giving someone who is not the actual author the credit for a work that was not written by that person is a problem. And when you think about open source open source developers using AI and copying and pasting code like this without knowing, it just creates a nightmare for companies.
Yeah, we were also trying to find, is there this, maybe there is this algorithm with this license somewhere in the internet that the AI has picked up, but we didn't find anything.
So in some way it brought together this name with a header and applied it to that code, but the rationale behind it, the visibility into it is unknown. And as Julian said, in the end, if it's the wrong header with the right code, you still have a serious issue. It's fascinating to hear about these issues unfolding, and we have a little more on this point. Let's bring in Daniel from FOSS-ID to continue the discussion with some insights. Daniel, you've heard us talk about the fact compliance is happening. You've heard us talk about hallucinations. You've heard us talk about how ScanOSS, a compliance company, found their code plagiarized by an AI.
Yeah, it's a really fun example. I would actually start out by saying that I think at the same time, I mean, even though I fully agree with all examples and all that has been stated here, we shouldn't really be, let's say, afraid of generative AI, because I think it's, let's be honest, it's a fantastic tool, and I think it has the potential to fundamentally change the way that we develop software. So our job, and I'm talking about me here representing FOSS-ID, of course, but I think everyone in the call here, I mean, our job is not to scare with the risks of generative AI, but rather to provide everyone with the necessary tools and the necessary processes and so on, so that you can leverage generative AI in an efficient, safe, and of course compliant way. If you look at some of the things that we are seeing among our customers, and we serve quite a number of customers around the globe with tools for compliance and software composition analysis. What we see in general is that engineering departments overall is getting more involved in compliance. There is actually a pull nowadays. And I think that, I mean, the root cause here is that they are eager to start to deploy AI tools. And consequently, they fully understand the sort of the compliance problem, and they get requirements to have proper tooling in place. This also means that there is a growing need for, let's say, specialized software composition analysis tools. The engineering department, on one hand, I mean, they want to have a gatekeeper that ensures that they don't introduce unwanted licenses within the code base, while a compliance team might want to have a different kind of tool that is more focused on reporting, SBOM generation, and so on. So there is a little bit of sort of differentiation within the industry going on. There's also, I mean, especially when we talk about bigger companies being part of a supply chain, an increased focus and awareness of regulatory compliance throughout the entire supply chain. And this is driven not the least by, I mean, initiatives like CRA and so on in the European Union. If we talk about AI specifically, I mean, then of course, I mean, there's nowadays attention to detecting software in snippet form. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a shift in how we integrate and how we generate software. I mean, we are moving from a world where, if I integrate third-party software, it was in terms of libraries. Now it becomes a snippet. So I'm compiling my software out of thousands of AI-generated snippets. And finally, I mean, the last observation here from what we have seen in the industry is that there is I think a need to extend, I mean, what we talk about in terms of software composition analysis to go beyond just open source. In many cases, working with commercial software and even detecting commercial software can be equally important in many cases, not the least from a license perspective. So in short, I think the consequences here is that there are, of course, both new challenges and new opportunities for anyone that works with compliance. And I think I see this as an opportunity for compliance as an area to take a step forward. And also, I mean, this could be driven by a little bit of a shift in the mindset that compliance can evolve from being, just, and I said just within quotation marks here, that just risk management to become more of an enabler, let's say, for generative AI. And I hope that's where we eventually could end up.
A fantastic series of points, Daniel. Thank you so much. And I think one of the key things that you said underlines why we're having this webinar. Generative AI isn't something to be afraid of, it's something to manage. I mean, every day I'm using Copilot with ChatGPT and Claude Sonnet 4.5. I'm using Claude Opus on a different subscription. I'm using Perplexity. I'm using generative AI in multiple directions simultaneously, and so are you or your colleagues or your customers or your suppliers or your developers. So the big question for us is how do we manage it? And that's where I think a lot of the people on this call will be potentially asking that question and asking, what's my place in this? The news headlines seem to suggest AI is going to replace us because it's better, faster, cheaper, and we'll all be out of a job by next spring. On the other hand, we've just seen that AI appears to be, occasionally drunk or somewhat covetous of other people's property. It's still a very young technology. It needs a lot of help. So we're in a situation where massive change is coming. We're not going to be supplemented, but we need to adjust our skill set. So what is the skill set needed to manage this stuff? What is it that we need to do? And this is where I'd like to throw it into the panel side of things and ask us a few questions and let everyone fight over who answers first. So there's 3 questions I'd like to bring to the table to get us started. But I also believe we're going to have an active poll, which Andreas will share a QR code for. This poll will allow us to get you, the audience, telling us some stuff anonymously, which helps drive the conversation forward. Andreas, would you like to share your QR code? Is that all right?
Sure.
Right. I'll grab my phone because I'll also take part in this poll. There we go.
This is what everybody would need. So we would like to find out who in your company is writing the code. Is it a human, the very classical approach, or do you just use AI? Or is there a mixture, or do you don't write code in your company at all? And for that, just please scan the QR code at the lower left corner. And then on your mobile phone, you can just put in your answer and we can look at that and then discuss with myself as well.
And this, wow, there's a lot of people answering already. This is going to be a background thing that we'll come to after we have our starting questions. So the starting questions, question 1, how do we ensure that legal, product, and OSPO or various combinations thereof work together to address the type of challenges we just displayed? Because there's silos, and obviously this is a cross-silo problem. Do you have any suggestions for how we manage that?
Can I raise my hand?
Of course.
All right. Well, I think we have a mix. This AI is a new problem. It's relatively new. I see here in the call a lot of people with many years of experience in this field. I see Gautam, Maximilian, Marcel. I don't want to leave anyone else, but this is what I see in the small part on the top. And we all started from companies that had mainly software in their products or a lot of software in their products. And mainly we started with license compliance as the motivation. But we have all seen in the last few years how two things happened. First, software expanded to new industries. So now you have companies that don't have all the years of expertise in dealing with this problem. Companies in the textile industry, for example, who are now seeing themselves forming an OSPO office to fulfill the ISO 5230 compliance, for example. And this is entirely new for them. So that's a totally different persona when you compare that with the company that has been dealing with this problem for 20, 25 years. And then on the other hand, we also see new risks because it's not just license compliance anymore. It's security, it's trade compliance, it's post-quantum security. It's provenance. I mean, we live in a quite polarized world, unfortunately, and where does the code come from is also something that starts to worry people. So I just wanted to throw that there just to define who is the one actually having this problem. I see there's quite a broad set of targets of people who are actually looking at this problem from different angles.
And it was striking. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Andreas. My apologies.
I just wanted to add to that. So what do you need to do in a company to manage this AI code generation? I think as it was just mentioned, as you mentioned, it's very new and there are no guidelines and companies don't know how to handle it. And so together with Chan Yo in our presentation, we highlighted the first step is that some organizational matters. So it's not, you first need to see who needs to be involved. What do I want to do as a company? Which risks do I want to take? And which benefits do I want to have? And who needs to look at the code? Do I need to have some contracts with my suppliers because they may deliver something which I don't want? What is in my contracts with my customers? Am I still safe, or do I need to add something there as well that I'm able to use generated code? So I think one of the first suggestions is we need to have some governance where it is clearly defined who can do what is allowed. When does a developer need to ask? Does he need to ask? Can he just put in AI code in the company repository? Does it need to be marked somehow that it can easily be found later on? Maybe in case there is a lawsuit that it can be detected, oh yeah, we did something wrong in the code, or it was AI generated code. All of that needs to be defined in some documentation, organizational question. And
I think
besides that, I want to jump to the second question. So we have the majority of our audience says, yeah, we are using AI and code. And then the second part of the question is, do you check your code? How do you make that it's legally sound? So you can do that in parallel.
Thing. Yes. Oh, now interestingly, and I know other people are just waiting to chime in as well on some of this discussion. Interestingly, on the first slide, when we asked people, do you use AI? Everyone said yes, apart from two people who said we're trying to doing any coding. So it looks like market penetration is 100% in our audience. Sorry, someone was about to say something, I think, as a follow-up to the question one, how do we deal with the different silos in a company? How do we ensure legal product and work together?
No, I was just going to say here that, I mean, as a comment to what was said previously, that yes, I mean, this is a completely new domain, and that means that, I mean, many of the questions that we are discussing now are new to all companies, even companies that have existed for a very long time. I mean, they are still new when it comes to generative AI. So everyone is struggling with the same problems, and I think given what Julian said here, that I mean there are a lot of different areas to consider. I mean, this is not only about license compliance. I mean, could be security, regulatory questions, and whatnot. One first step is to just agree on what are the areas to cover. I mean, when we when we talk about generative AI, or we set a policy for usage of generative AI within the company, what are the areas that we must cover? Because it's not only licensing questions. There could be much more to consider. So I think that that's a step one. And then based on that, I mean, we can have a discussion about how should the sort of split of responsibility be between engineering department or OSPO or legal internally.
A really good point. And that raises us the second question in our kind of pre-prepared questions, which is, do you have any guidance to address situations where developers are reluctant to change behavior to contain risk around generative AI? And this actually coincides with what's happening in the chat of this webinar in the background, where people are saying, there's something of a question, is AI any different to a software developer? One person said, I've seen similar issues in the past without AI being involved. He noted the pace might be very different here. And another party said, it's always an education issue, so we need to educate AI to correctly attribute, as we need to do with our developers. And chimed in another person, and tools to support this. Right, education and tooling to address it. In other words, in some ways, situation normal. But what do we do to address a situation where developers are reluctant to change behavior, but might be just asking generative AI to do something and not really checking what's going on? I mean, we just saw in this survey poll, is code being checked to see if it is legally sound? 8, yes. 5, I don't know. Which I think is a very interesting mix. You know, it indicates that there's quite a few parties who aren't sure if stuff is legally sound. And that's exactly what we expected. You know, we don't expect that everyone's going to be able to manage all of this at this stage. But what do we do if there's a developer who says, no, thank you, I just want to use my chat window and tell it to fix the code. Don't give me an extra process, I'm busy.
If I can take the microphone again.
Of course.
One thing that it is for sure is that AI provides you superpowers and you code much faster, and developers like that. So companies, of course, have this challenge of having to solve this problem in some way without creating overhead. Because if you're just going to spend the time that you save by coding with AI, I mean, it just defeats the purpose, right? So that's the challenge. And I think that we all agree that this is a problem that has to be automated. This is something that companies have learned along the years, that you better catch the problem as close as possible when it's introduced and not at the end of a development cycle, for example. So this is a problem that is resolved by integrating CI/CD pipelines into, among all the things that are done, does the code compile? Does the code pass the tests? Does the code contain any open source that is not supposed to be there, for example? So I think that is, I will say, the most common point in which we tend to agree. That's where the problem has to be solved in the DevOps cycle.
Mhm.
Very good point.
Yeah, so if I can, or I just go ahead.
Yeah, no, I can just chip in here. I mean, I'm a developer from the beginning, so I like to think that developers are rational beings in the sense that, I mean, quite often when we face resistance or that we see resistance from developers, I mean, there can be a good reason behind it. I mean, it's I think as you, Julian, were into here, that I mean, it could be a fear of losing productivity or I mean, some other kind of friction in the development cycle. And the way to address this is of course to make sure that whatever we put in place is very well integrated into their existing workflow. And you can perhaps say that we want to make this, I mean, the safe way of doing things, the fastest way for the developer. So there is no reason to feel that friction at all. And I mean, the only way to achieve that is to have them very much involved from the beginning, because you cannot sort of enforce processes from the outside and hope that it sort of fits into the workflows that already are in place on the developer side.
Such a good point. Such a
Yeah.
good point.
So I also think I'm also a developer by my heart, and when from all the developers I know, we always want to do a good job and we want to produce good code, and I think it's mainly an awareness challenge. So as soon as people are educated and they know about the risks, then they will do something about it and they will not be that resistant. So when it's clearly explained, why is this a risk? Why do I need to do something about it? And these are the solutions, what I can do. Then it will run by itself.
It's such a good point about the tools. How do you manage it? And I just wanted to show you something, which is a hobby project on the weekends. I'm messing with AI generated code and getting it to do things in various languages. And one thing I found was that the very helpful but drunk toddler was best controlled if it was given something like a guide document. So I give it a document telling it how to do a workflow, telling it what not to do. And when you're in a situation like that, and you then tell your AI to review this document and keep pushing it back to these guidance things, it tends to behave relatively well and need less nudging than it would otherwise. Just, I think, indicating that there are ways that we can integrate AI into workflows with new controls that allow us to keep the acceleration, but to avoid the most unexpected hallucinations or activities, put them on guide rails. Now, you'll obviously know that when you have guide rails like this, that's all very well, but as soon as it goes out of its context window, it's forgotten what you told it to do. So you have to keep telling it to go read this again. But just an interesting thing that we can keep the acceleration without necessarily allowing it to go wild. Now, our third question, and this is the most important actually, what skills do we need to address these challenges? And if we build these skills, how might they also be of benefit to our personal portfolios? In other words, when we, the crowd I'm pointing at on this panel, started out, open source was new and exciting and special and unknown and dangerous. And that meant that we had this incredible opportunity to become change managers and process experts. It helped us in our careers in innumerable ways. Presumably, this has the same potential for helping people in their personal career, as well as helping their company right now in addressing the opportunity. But do you have any thoughts of the skills that are needed, and which skills are transferable in career development?
I think it's really interesting because I mean what we talk about here is very much a sort of cross-functional domain, and you don't have to be sort of an expert in I mean you don't have to be a lawyer and developer and open source specialist and product manager all in one. But I think it's very helpful if you can, yeah, let's say, speak a little bit of the language of all domains so that you can, yeah, not being the stakeholder in all these areas, but at least communicate with the stakeholders in all these areas. And I think that can very much help you, I mean, both professionally and also, I mean, help you sort of advance as an individual. So I think that's a good starting point.
A fantastic point.
Sorry, I totally agree with Daniel, and I think you first need to have development background, right? Because you need to understand the the architecture and then your internal tooling and all your processes and stuff. But you have to have spent time in meeting rooms with attorneys and trade compliance officers and cryptographers and so on. So it is quite cross-functional, but I think the foundation is development / DevOps.
Yeah, I also think how a developer will work in the future, that will dramatically change from how software is developed today. But we have seen that in the past. So if I look back like the last 20, 25 years, there have been many dramatic changes on how software has been written. But now that is very different, and it's a dramatic increase in speed. And developers just need to be very, you need to know on how to work with an AI and how it can support you, but there is no way around. It will be, you need to make yourself know these new technologies and how you can work with it. You need to know what risks are there, and then you can unfold the full potential of them.
I can add that,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, as someone who is aging, and for the young people who is jumping into this problem, who were born with open source, I always like to make a parallelism between what was the rise of open source, comparing that with AI. Because if you remember in the beginning, it was like, what is this thing? I mean, it was chaos because companies were taking code in that was not written by any vendor or by themselves. There was no control, so there's no warranty. What is this thing? It is imposing limitations in the way I license my product. So cancel it, ban it. That was the first thing, if you all remember. And after that, you realize that if you don't embrace open source, you don't have the advantage. You have a handicap compared to companies who do embrace it and take those building blocks. They code much faster. So and develop and build products much faster. So we went from banning to embracing to standardizing, and you have a lot to do in that front, Shane. And I think that the same will happen, and we've seen that happening with AI, just at a much faster pace. Ban it. No, don't use AI in any company. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we have it. Oh, there are tools, and we're going to go through the same phase. Embracing and standardizing compliance and common practices around it.
Someone called Mary Wang from Volvo Cars made a great comment about 2 years ago, actually. She was ahead of her time. She made a comment that she thinks in the future there will be no software developers, there will be architects guiding AI. And I think she hit the nail on the head. I mean, like Andreas pointed out, when we started out, velocity was different. Things were a lot different. When I got my first IDE, it didn't include the compiler, and I couldn't afford a compiler, so I went to open source. And now for $10, I can have multiple AI through Copilot working on stuff with me, and we can compile it whenever we feel like at light speed. It's just remarkable how things have changed. But yeah, adult supervision of incredibly automated tools sounds like an interesting path forward. What is a developer will change. But of course, adult supervision does seem to be rather needed, as this panel made clear. So people will still have jobs, they'll just have a different job.
Definitely. I would like to comment one of the questions that were there. So is it different when an AI produces code from a developer? Or is it not? And I think it depends on how the AI is used. For example, if you use it in your IDE and you just have the AI to complete what you start writing, then you have a dramatic increase of speed, but you still have control, you know what is happening. It's just like increasing typing speed. And the examples we showed, the AI can also give you full algorithms. And there I see a big danger that you don't understand anymore what is happening. So people who are not developers will write code and nobody knows what is in the code, what will happen, which side effects are there. So it depends on how you use it. I think developers or the architects, it's very important that they still should understand what is being generated. And there was a very interesting comment from, in some of the recent webinars with Mr. Schwarz, and he mentioned there is a difference in the ownership of the code. So if you as a developer write it for your company, the company will own it. However, if it's generated by AI, you cannot have the IP of that part. And that may be very important when a company or product is sold or not. So if it's all just AI generated code, then it doesn't belong to you. It does not have an owner. And that may be legally a very big difference in who writes the code.
I'm sure we'll see some interesting lawsuits appear around that topic to determine what's going on. Wild guess, the defining line will be the difference between is it copyrighted versus the aggregate into a product, which may be the defining question for the next generation of lawyers. So, all of those lawyers watching this, now you know where your money's coming from. Now, I wanted to give a chance for the audience to ask a question. Don't forget, you can unmute yourself or you can write a question in the chat. So do feel free to chime in. While we're giving people a chance to think about that, I wanted to throw one last question out. The dialogue around AI tends to be dominated by Western models. People are talking about Copilot, which is a provider, and we have, ChatGPT coming through that. Well, GPT-5, we've got Claude, we've got these various models. But over in Asia, we're seeing an awful lot of AI models come out of places like China, which are open source models using licenses like MIT. For instance, Ling just came out from Ant Finance, which is a large bank. We've seen an awful lot of models appearing, and the only one I can think of which I regularly see used in Western programming is Chen Tree. Quen is how they pronounce it a lot in the West, from Alibaba. But I don't really see much discussion of this. Yet the velocity of AI models, the velocity of AI coding in places like China seems to even exceed what we're seeing in places like the United States. I do hope over time we'll have more representatives from China come and tell us what they're doing and how they're dealing with the risks and management, because I know it's a very big question as well. Right. I have one question to end for all of you, and that is if you had one piece of advice to give to someone who's, let's say, early 30s, they're in open source for a while, they're moving up towards management level, they see this as an opportunity to help their company and their career. If you had one piece of advice for how do they get started, what should they start doing tomorrow to start working on this problem and benefiting as a professional and learning from it? What website do they go to? What tool do they try? What person do they talk to? What is the thing they should do tomorrow after being inspired by this webinar?
Well, if they haven't started already, I think the first thing that they should do is to try it out hands-on for themselves. I mean, just fire up any of these models. I mean, it doesn't matter if we're talking about, let's say, Western models or Eastern models. Any models, just try out the technology, because until you have tried for yourself and played around with it, I mean, build any kind of hobby project or whatever. I mean, it's a learning experience, and I think you will have a completely new perspective on this once you're done. Yeah, try to avoid to make this into, let's say, a theoretical academic exercise.
That's a great point. And with the starting price, I think Copilot is $10 a month. Spend $10 and just go play.
Yeah,
I would have the same recommendation. Get started. So if you have not started yet, try it out, play around with it, and only when you see how it works, then you can look at the bigger picture. So what are the risks? Where can I use it? What does not work? But all of that you need to try out. You need to get hands-on.
Yeah.
I would add, once you have tried it, embrace AI, because there is no other way around it. But just make sure that you have the guardrails in place to ensure all kinds of compliances. And this is just yet another tick in the box when you check the code that you're being submitting.
That's a very good point. Oh, I see we've got a couple of questions in suddenly. One is Marcel saying, will I share the AI start document that I created? And I answered, sure, before realizing I should have sold it. But okay, fine, you can have it. I'll put that out. People will get a copy of it. Nauman asked, what is the best practice to follow for open compliance in AI-generated code? That's, I think, a bit like how long is a piece of string? It depends. But the good news is that OpenChain has got an AI compliance guide, which I will share with you, that can help you get started. I'm going to just put this on the screen very quickly as a reference. I put it in the chat. So we have an AI system bill of materials compliance guide, very short version. It's process management that can help people a little bit. And once you have the overall idea of how to approach the problem, then you can go and start making choices about SBOM formats and tooling and all of that. Another question, this is a long one. Beyond education for developers, what responsibilities do companies have to retrain developers into more architectural roles and invest in organizational change management while still balancing vibe coding for proof of concept? Are there any foundation-led programs? If you mean, are there any Linux Foundation-led programs, we have a ton of stuff on AI. But the determination of educating developers moving into architecture, the determination of vibe coding for proof of concept is a company by company. But I'm sure other people have different insights. Oh, Stefan's hand is up. Stefan, over to you. I'm not getting audio. Right. Stefan seems to have
try again.
There we go. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Was the wrong microphone. Thank you, Shane, for that wonderful, and all the others for that wonderful presentation. And it showed me again how careful you have to be with AI. And from my legal background, I would just suggest that when you use AI, no matter if it's Copilot or anything else, as a developer, make notes. Write down what you do, what you typed in, what you got out, and where you might have used it. Because that's the worst you can do. Just play with it around. It's nothing wrong with it. And then if someone asks you from legal, you don't know what you did, and if you use that code somewhere. So that's from my legal background what I would suggest when you play around with Copilot and other AI tools.
That's such a good point, because it's a tool. It will do what you tell it to do. And the problem is, there was a joke, was that in Douglas Adams or something? Someone made a joke that if you tell AI, and this is 35, 40 years ago, if you tell AI to make plastic forks, the universe will fill with plastic forks. You know, these things do exactly what we tell them. And as a side note, just example, here's this code base, and I can just tell it, fix everything and change stuff. And it'll start thinking about how to do that. So that's the problem. It's actually working on that problem right now. I'm going to switch off that because who knows what it's going to do to my code base. Yeah, you have to guide it. Stefan, that's such a good point. Write down what you've done so you can trace back.
In a minute, electricity goes off if you let it run.
All of Tokyo shuts down. It took fix everything literally. It's going for the universe. Right. With that, we're at the hour. I hope that people watching this got the understanding that there are issues, there are reasons to be concerned, but all of us are really actually pretty optimistic about this. What we want to say is that we have to think through the structures, and we want to help you. Daniel, Julian, Andreas, thank you so much for going through all of this with us. It's been a lot.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you, Shane.
Yes.
Of course. And
Thank you as well.
I have to give a special thanks to Chanjo, who's currently leading his company full of lawyers towards brave new horizons of litigation. Right, everyone. Have a beautiful day, and I will talk with you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.